Grief isn't just sadness. It isn't just the image we often see in movies, someone crying quietly in a corner, wiping away tears until they magically stop. No, grief is far more complex than that. It's an invisible weight that sits on your chest, pressing against your every breath, and it doesn't always look like sorrow from the outside. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion. Sometimes it looks like silence. And sometimes it even looks like a smile that hides a storm inside. Here on Behind the Smile, I want you to know whatever shape your grief takes, it is valid. Every shade of it, every moment, because grief isn't one-dimensional. It's layered, it's unpredictable, and it has a way of weaving itself into our daily lives in ways people on the outside may never notice. Think about the mornings after a loss. You wake up and for a split second, you forget. The world feels normal until it doesn't, until you remember what's missing. And then, like a tidal wave, the reality crashes over you, pulling you under. That's the invisible weight of yesterday. It follows you into today and tomorrow. It shows up when you least expect it. And yet, here's the hard part. Society doesn't really know how to deal with this weight. People around us sometimes get uncomfortable with grief. They want to see us smile. They want to see us move forward. They want to believe we're okay because our pain reminds them of their own fears. And so they push us, gently or not so gently, to get over it. They may stop asking how we're doing, stop checking in, and even start changing the subject when we bring it up. But grief doesn't follow a timeline. There's no expiration date. And that's one of the most important truths we need to embrace here together. Grief isn't something you finish like a project. It's something you learn to live with. It's not about closure. It's about integration. So when people ask, how long will it take until you feel normal again? The real answer is, there is no normal to return to. There's only a new normal to discover. And that takes time, compassion, and space. That's why this channel, this community exists. Behind the Smile is your safe haven to lay that invisible weight down, even if just for a few moments while we talk together. Now, let's think about what this invisible weight really feels like. For some, it's heaviness in the body, fatigue, a struggle to get out of bed, or a fog that clouds your thinking. For others, it's emotional, waves of guilt, anger, or confusion that come out of nowhere. And for many, it's spiritual, a questioning of meaning, of faith, of purpose. The weight can look different on everyone, but it's there, and it's real. The metaphor I often use is this: grief is like carrying a backpack filled with stones. At first, the weight is unbearable. You can barely stand, you stumble, you fall, and it feels like you'll never move forward. But over time, you don't throw the backpack away. You learn to carry it differently. The stones may shift, some may even get lighter, but they're always with you in some form, and that's okay, because those stones represent love, memory, and the pieces of life that matter deeply to you. But here's where the struggle comes in. The world doesn't see the backpack. They just see you, standing, moving, maybe even smiling. And so they assume you're fine. They don't see the invisible weight pressing on your shoulders every single day. And when people don't see, they often misunderstand. They may say things like, "You look great, you must be doing better," or "It's time to focus on the positive." Those words, even if well-meaning, can feel like salt in a wound. That's why it's so important to have spaces like this one. Places where the invisible weight can be acknowledged, where you don't have to pretend it doesn't exist, where you can say, "Yes, I'm still hurting," without fear of judgment. Here, in Behind the Smile, we make the invisible visible. We say out loud the things society often keeps quiet. Another layer of this weight comes from the idea that grief should look the same for everyone. But grief doesn't fit into neat categories. Some people cry every day, Others don't shed a tear. Some throw themselves into work or projects, while others can't get out of bed. Some find solace in faith, while others wrestle with doubt. None of these paths are wrong. They are simply different ways of carrying the invisible weight. And I want to pause here to tell you something really important. However you are grieving, it is valid. Your way is your way. Don't let anyone convince you that you're doing it wrong. Don't let anyone tell you that because you didn't cry at the funeral, you must not have cared. Or because you laughed one day, you must have moved on. Or because you're still hurting after months or years, you must be weak. No, your grief is yours, and it belongs here. Now, let's talk about another truth. The invisible weight of yesterday doesn't just sit in the past. It leaks into the present and the future. It shows up in everyday life in unexpected ways. Maybe you walk into a room and instinctively look for someone who's no longer there. Maybe you pick up your phone to share good news only to remember the person you'd call is gone. Maybe you plan for the future and realize it won't look the way you once dreamed. That's grief. That's the invisible weight shaping your every step. And yet, even as heavy as it feels, acknowledging it is the first step towards carrying it with more strength. Because grief, as invisible as it is, doesn't have to be a solitary burden. When we name it, when we talk about it, when we share it in communities like this one, the weight doesn't necessarily disappear, but it does feel lighter. This is why being honest about grief matters, not just for ourselves, but for others who are walking similar paths. When you share your story, even if it's just a small piece, you remind someone else that they're not alone in their invisible weight. And when you listen to someone else's story, you remind yourself that your feelings are normal, that your process is valid, that your weight is seen. So, as we sit here together in this first section, let me remind you again, this is your safe haven. Behind every smile is a story. Behind every strong face is a weight. And behind every viewer of this video is a journey that deserves compassion. You don't have to put your grief on a timeline. You don't have to measure your healing against anyone else's. You don't have to carry the invisible weight alone. Here, we see it, we honor it, and we walk with you as you learn to carry it. Because the truth is, while grief may never fully leave, you are stronger than you realize. And step by step, you will discover that the invisible weight of yesterday does not have to crush you. It can, in time, become part of the story that shapes who you are becoming. This is Behind the Smile. This is your safe haven. And together, we will keep walking this path, one step at a time.
Have you ever noticed how people sometimes talk about grief as if it follows a straight line, like a checklist you just move through? First comes denial, then anger, then bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. It almost sounds neat and tidy, doesn't it? Like if you just endure long enough, you'll arrive at the last step, close the book, and suddenly everything will make sense again. But the truth is, grief rarely works that way. And if you've experienced loss, in any form, you probably already know this. Grief is not a straight path. It's not a series of steps you climb until you reach the top and never look back. Instead, it's more like waves crashing onto a shore. Sometimes those waves are soft and gentle, lapping at your feet. Other times they come crashing down so hard that they knock the breath out of you, even when you thought you were doing better. And that's the heart of this section, understanding grief's many faces. It doesn't wear just one mask. It doesn't fit just one story. And here, in this safe haven, we honor every version of it. No matter what yours looks like, you belong here. Let's start with this. Grief is not always about death. Of course, the loss of a loved one can leave a wound so deep it feels impossible to carry. But grief can also come from other places. It can come from the end of a relationship, where the future you imagined is suddenly gone. It can come from losing a job or a dream you poured your heart into. It can even come from losing a version of yourself, your health, your identity, your sense of stability. Sometimes grief shows up not because of something that was taken away, but because of something that never arrived. The child someone hoped to have, the career they worked for but couldn't reach, the person they once thought they'd become but never did. These losses are just as valid, just as real. And yet, because society often talks about grief only in terms of death, so many people suffering these quieter forms of grief feel invisible. Have you ever felt that way? Like your pain wasn't big enough to deserve space? Maybe you told yourself, other people have it worse, so I should just get over it. If so, I want you to hear this clearly. Your grief is real, it matters, and it has a place here. Now, let's talk about the myth of getting over it. People mean well when they say things like, time heals all wounds, but often that phrase doesn't land the way they think it will. Because in reality, grief doesn't just go away with time. It changes. It reshapes itself. Some days it feels lighter, other days heavier, but it doesn't vanish. Think of it this way. Imagine carrying a stone in your pocket. At first, the stone feels unbearably heavy, and it cuts into your skin every time you move. Over time, you might learn how to walk with it, how to carry it differently. It may not feel as sharp against your hand anymore, but the stone is still there. You don't get rid of it, you simply grow stronger around it. That's why it's so important to talk about grief as something we move forward with, not something we move on from. Because when people are told to move on, it can feel like they're being asked to erase the person they lost, or to forget the dream that once meant so much to them. And forgetting is never the goal. The goal is learning how to live alongside the loss, integrating it into who we are without letting it consume us. One of the most powerful ways to understand grief is by listening to stories. Not just your own, but the stories of others. Every single person carries grief differently, and when we share those experiences, something incredible happens. We realize we're not as alone as we thought. There's the story of a woman who lost her husband unexpectedly and found herself unable to even step into the kitchen because everything in it reminded her of him. She felt broken, like she wasn't grieving the right way. But then, months later, she began cooking again, not to erase him, but to honor him, because food was his love language, and she wanted to keep that alive. Or the man who grieved the loss of his dream to become a professional athlete. He carried shame because he thought grief over a dream wasn't real grief. But eventually he realized that the pain of losing something you deeply identify with can be as cutting as losing a person. His story teaches us that grief has many entry points. Or even the young woman who grieved not a person or a dream, but a part of herself she felt she had lost after a chronic illness diagnosis. Her story reminds us that we don't just grieve others, we grieve versions of ourselves too. Stories like these remind us that grief isn't something we check off a list. It's something deeply personal, shaped by the contours of our lives, our relationships, and our identities. And when we share them, even in small, quiet ways, we give others permission to do the same. But here's the thing. Society doesn't always make this easy. Many people feel pressure to hide their grief, to wear a mask of "I'm fine," because they don't want to make others uncomfortable. Maybe you've felt that yourself. The sting of someone avoiding your eyes after your loss, or the awkward silence when you bring it up. This discomfort creates isolation. It convinces us that grief should be a private battle, fought behind closed doors. But here, in this community, we say no to that. We say grief is not something to hide, but something to honor. Your story is not a burden. It's part of what connects us. And when you speak it out loud, when you give it space, you not only help yourself, but you create a safe haven for others to do the same. So let's take a breath together. Wherever you are right now, whether you're carrying fresh grief that feels unbearable or walking with older grief that still tugs at you unexpectedly, I want you to know you are not broken. You are not doing it wrong. Grief doesn't have one face, one voice, one timeline. It has many, and yours is just as valid as anyone else's. Maybe your grief shows up in tears. Maybe it shows up in silence. Maybe it shows up in bursts of anger you don't understand, or in laughter that surprises you. Maybe some days you feel strong, and others you can barely get out of bed. Every single one of those faces is part of the truth of grief. None of them disqualify you from healing. As we continue this journey together, I want to leave you with this. Grief is not a weakness. It's a reflection of love, of attachment, of the deep capacity we have as humans to care for one another and for the futures we dream of. The very fact that you feel grief means that something mattered to you. That love, that dream, that person, they were real, and nothing can erase that. So instead of asking, how do I get rid of this grief, maybe the better question is, how do I learn to carry it in a way that still allows me to live fully? That's what this space is about. That's what Behind the Smile stands for. A safe haven, a place where you can acknowledge every face of your grief without judgment, without timeline, and without shame. And together, step by step, we'll keep exploring how to move forward, not by forgetting, but by honoring, not by erasing, but by carrying, not by silencing, but by giving voice. Because grief, with all its faces, is not the end of your story. It's a part of it, and you don't have to face it alone.
Have you ever noticed how grief can make the world feel unbearably small? One day, you're surrounded by people, noise, laughter, and the next, it feels like everything shrinks. Suddenly, rooms that were once filled with love and life feel empty. Conversations seem harder to join, and maybe, just maybe, you find yourself retreating further and further into silence. This is one of grief's quietest tricks: isolation. It convinces us that no one will understand. It whispers that we're too much, too heavy, too broken to be with others. And yet, even in the darkest seasons of grief, one of the most healing truths is this: connection matters. It doesn't take the pain away, but it makes the weight just a little lighter to carry. And in this space, this safe haven, we remind ourselves that we were never meant to carry it alone. Let's talk about the power of connection. Because sometimes when you're grieving, connection feels impossible. Maybe you've tried to open up before, only to be met with silence or advice that stung more than it soothed. Maybe someone told you to stay strong when all you really needed was permission to fall apart. Or maybe people disappeared altogether, unsure of what to say or how to act. If that's happened to you, I want to say this first: it's not your fault. People often struggle with how to respond to grief, not because your pain is too big, but because they've never been taught how to hold space for it. And while that lack can hurt deeply, it doesn't mean you don't deserve support. It doesn't mean you're alone forever. One of the most powerful gifts you can offer to someone who is grieving is presence. Not advice, not solutions, not even the perfect words, just presence. To sit with them in their silence. To hold their story without trying to fix it. To say, with your actions, I see you. I hear you. You don't have to walk through this alone. Think about it. When has someone's simple presence brought you comfort? Maybe it was a friend who just sat quietly beside you when you couldn't stop crying. Or the family member who checked in every day, not with pressure, but with patience. Or even the stranger who smiled kindly when you felt invisible. These small acts matter more than we realize. They don't erase the grief,
but they remind us that connection is still possible in the middle of it. But connection goes both ways, doesn't it? Sometimes we're the one grieving. Other times we're the one standing beside someone else's grief. And if you've ever felt unsure of what to say or worried you'd say the wrong thing, you're not alone. That fear is universal. So let's pause here and talk about what helps and what doesn't. What doesn't help? Phrases like, "They're in a better place." "At least you had time together." "Everything happens for a reason." "You should be over it by now." People say these things with good intentions, but words like these can feel dismissive. They can feel like someone is trying to tidy up your grief, to box it neatly so it's easier for them to understand. But grief isn't neat, it's raw. And when you're in it, what you need most isn't a solution, it's acknowledgement. So what helps? Words like, "I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say, but I'm here. This must be so hard for you. I don't want to rush you. Take your time. Can I just sit with you?" Notice the difference? These words don't try to solve anything. They don't try to minimize the pain. They simply affirm the reality of it and the person experiencing it. That's what empathy looks like. It's saying, "I may not fully understand your grief, but I'm willing to walk beside you in it." Another powerful form of connection comes through remembrance. When we create spaces to remember together, whether through stories, rituals, or simple shared moments, we remind ourselves that grief is not just about pain. It's also about love. Think of how families gather to share memories of someone they've lost. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they laugh. But in both, there's healing. Or consider cultural rituals that honor ancestors, not as a way of clinging to the past, but as a way of carrying them forward. These acts of remembrance tell us something profound. The people we've lost, or the versions of ourselves we've left behind, don't disappear entirely. They live on in the stories we tell, in the rituals we create, in the love that still lingers. You might find solace in lighting a candle, or writing letters to the one you've lost, or cooking their favorite meal, or starting a new tradition in their honor. These acts don't erase grief, but they transform it into connection. Connection to the past, and connection to others who share that memory with you. But connection doesn't only happen through family or close friends. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from community. From stepping into a circle of people who understand because they too are walking through grief. Support groups, both in person and online, can be lifelines. Imagine sitting in a room with strangers and realizing that every single one of them knows what it feels like to carry a stone of grief in their pocket. You don't have to explain why you're still hurting months or even years later. They just know. That shared understanding can bring relief, because suddenly you're not too much. You're not broken. You're simply human, in the company of other humans doing the hard work of healing. And if you're part of this Behind the Smile community, I want you to know that's exactly what this space is too. A safe haven, a circle of voices, a reminder that wherever you are in your grief, whether it's raw and heavy or quiet and enduring, you belong. Connection also requires courage. Courage to reach out when you'd rather hide. Courage to pick up the phone and say, "I'm not okay." Courage to let someone in, even if it's just for a few minutes. Grief often tempts us to isolate, to withdraw into silence because it feels safer. And sometimes that solitude is necessary. Sometimes you need quiet space to process. But long-term isolation can deepen the ache. We were made for connection. And even though grief convinces us otherwise, connection is one of the most powerful tools we have for healing. So if you're listening right now, and you've been retreating into isolation, let this be your gentle reminder. You don't have to do this alone. Connection doesn't mean talking to everyone or forcing yourself to be social before you're ready. It can be as simple as texting one trusted friend, or joining a small group online, or even starting here, by listening, by showing up in this safe space, by being part of a community that welcomes you just as you are. As we close this section, I want you to picture something with me. Imagine yourself standing on a shoreline, waves of grief at your feet. It's cold, it's overwhelming. You're not sure if you can stand much longer. And then, slowly, you feel another hand slip into yours. They don't try to pull you away from the water. They don't tell you to stop feeling it. They just stand with you. Together, you both watch the waves crash. Together, you both breathe. That is the power of connection. It doesn't erase the tide, but it steadies you against it. It reminds you that you are not alone, that there are people willing to stand with you until the waves quiet again. So here's the heart of this message. Grief isolates, but healing connects. Presence matters more than perfect words. Remembrance transforms pain into meaning. And courage opens the door to support, even when silence feels safer. This community, behind the smile, is your safe haven. It's your reminder that all are welcome here. Every story, every face of grief, every imperfect attempt to keep moving forward. Whether you're here to listen, to share, or simply to be, you are part of this circle of connection. And together, step by step, we'll keep finding solace, not in the absence of grief, but in the presence of one another.
When we talk about resilience, it's easy to imagine it as some kind of armor, something that makes us tough, unbreakable, able to march through pain without flinching. But here's the truth. Real resilience doesn't look like cold, hard steel. Real resilience is soft, flexible, and deeply human. It's not about pretending the pain isn't there. It's about learning how to live with it, how to grow with it, and how to keep walking, even when your heart still aches. And that's what this section is about. Cultivating resilience after loss. Not the kind of resilience that erases grief, but the kind that makes space for it. Because after loss, the goal isn't to move on. It's to move forward with the love, the lessons, and yes, even the echoes of grief that remain. Let's begin with this simple truth. You are stronger than you realize. If you're listening to this right now, it means you've already survived moments you once thought you couldn't. Think back to that first wave of loss, the way it knocked the air out of your chest, the way it made the world feel unrecognizable. And yet, here you are. Maybe bruised, maybe tired, maybe still questioning, but here. That is resilience already at work, whether you recognize it or not. But resilience isn't just survival, it's transformation. It's the shift from asking, how do I get through this, to asking, how do I carry this and still live fully? That shift takes time, and it takes practice, but it's possible. One of the first steps in cultivating resilience is changing how we think about loss. So often, people frame healing as letting go, as if you're supposed to drop your grief somewhere along the road and never look back. But resilience doesn't ask you to erase your loss. It asks you to integrate it into your life in a way that allows you to keep moving forward. Think of your grief like a scar. It's not something you get rid of. It's something that becomes part of you. Over time, that scar may fade, but it will always tell the story of what you've endured. And strangely enough, scars can be beautiful. They remind us not only of what hurt us, but also of how we healed. So, resilience doesn't mean the absence of grief. It means carrying grief differently. Less like a heavy chain dragging behind you, and more like a woven thread stitched into the fabric of your life. Another step in resilience is recognizing the unexpected strengths that emerge from loss. At first, grief feels like pure destruction, like it's stripped everything away. But slowly, almost invisibly, it can also build. It can deepen your empathy for others. It can sharpen your awareness of what truly matters. It can spark creativity,
compassion, even courage. For example, someone who loses a loved one might discover the strength to start a support group, helping others who are grieving. Someone whose dream has shattered might find new purpose in mentoring others, guiding them through the same roadblocks. Someone facing the loss of health might become an advocate, raising awareness and support for others walking the same path. This isn't to say that grief is worth it because of these strengths. The pain is real, and nothing diminishes it. But resilience means allowing that pain to shape you into someone who not only survives, but also grows in ways you never imagined. There's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that after trauma, some people experience profound positive change. Not because the trauma was good, never that, but because they were forced to confront life in a deeper, more intentional way. They find new perspectives, new priorities, even new levels of gratitude. Maybe you've already glimpsed this in your own life. Perhaps loss made you cherish small moments more. The warmth of a sunrise, the laughter of a child, the comfort of a quiet evening. Maybe it pushed you to mend broken relationships or to pursue dreams you'd been putting off. These are all signs of resilience taking root. But let's be clear, resilience doesn't mean you won't still feel pain. You will. The echoes of grief don't vanish. There will still be days when the sadness feels heavy, when a song or a smell or a memory brings the ache rushing back. Resilience doesn't erase those moments. It gives you the tools to face them without being consumed. And one of those tools is self-compassion. Too often we beat ourselves up for not healing fast enough or for still being sad after all this time. But grief doesn't run on a timeline. There's no clock ticking down, no finish line you have to reach. Self-compassion means giving yourself permission to feel whatever you feel, whenever you feel it, without judgment. It means saying to yourself, it's okay that I'm not okay today. It means resting when you need rest, crying when you need to cry, smiling when joy sneaks in, and never shaming yourself for any of it. Because resilience grows not from harshness, but from gentleness. Another important practice in resilience is creating meaning. When we face loss, life can suddenly feel meaningless. The question, why, lingers painfully. And while we may never have the full answer, we can create meaning in how we live going forward. That might look like honoring the memory of someone you've lost through a foundation, a tradition, or simply by embodying the values they taught you. It might look like finding meaning in your own survival, choosing to live fully as a way of honoring the life you still have. It might even look like giving back, helping others who are struggling because you know firsthand what that feels like. Meaning doesn't cancel grief, but it gives it purpose. It transforms pain into something that can carry you forward rather than hold you back. Resilience also grows in small, daily practices. Sometimes we think healing requires big, dramatic steps, but often it's the little things. Getting out of bed on a hard morning, taking a walk, drinking water, talking to a friend, journaling your feelings, practicing gratitude, even if it's just for one tiny thing. Each small act is like laying a brick. One by one, they may not seem like much, but over time, they build something strong, something steady, a foundation of resilience. So ask yourself, what's one small act of resilience you can practice today? Maybe it's as simple as breathing deeply. Maybe it's calling a friend. Maybe it's writing down one thing you're grateful for. Start small and let it grow. Now, I want to address something important. Resilience doesn't mean doing it all alone. In fact, one of the greatest strengths of resilience is knowing when to reach out for support. Whether it's through therapy, counseling, support groups, or trusted friends and family, resilience is often cultivated in connection. Think of resilience like a fire. You can spark it on your own, but it grows stronger when others help feed it. Their presence, their encouragement, their understanding, all of it adds fuel to your ability to keep moving forward. So don't be afraid to lean on others. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That is not weakness. That's resilience in action. As we close this section, I want to leave you with this picture. Imagine yourself walking through a dense forest. The path is uneven and the trees are thick. At first, it feels impossible to navigate. But slowly, you notice that your feet are growing steadier. You find your balance. You learn which roots to step over, which branches to push aside. You may stumble, you may fall, but each time you rise again. That is resilience. Not walking without falling, but learning how to rise when you do. Not pretending the forest isn't dark, but discovering that you can still move through it. And eventually, as you keep walking, you begin to notice patches of light breaking through the trees. That light is hope, and resilience is what carries you toward it. So here's the truth. Resilience doesn't erase loss. It doesn't silence the echoes of grief, but it does help us carry them differently. It helps us honor what's been lost while still embracing what's ahead. It helps us transform pain into strength and sorrow into compassion. And here in this safe haven, behind the smile, you are reminded that resilience isn't about being unshakable. It's about being real, being human, and choosing day by day to keep moving forward. You've already proven that you can survive. Now, step by step, you are learning how to live.
Have you ever noticed how a sunrise feels different after a storm? The colors seem richer, the air somehow lighter, and the silence between the chirping birds feels sacred. That's what healing can feel like. Not a denial of the storm, but a reminder that light can break through even the darkest skies. Welcome to the final part of our journey here on Behind the Smile. If you stayed with me this long, I want you to pause and acknowledge yourself, truly, because staying present with these reflections is no small thing. It means you are willing to look at your pain, your losses, and your scars, and still search for meaning. And that is already a form of courage that many people don't recognize in themselves. So today, let's talk about what it really means to illuminate tomorrow's path. This is not about erasing grief or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about discovering the quiet ways in which we can carry hope forward, even if it flickers like the smallest flame. Think of a lantern carried by someone walking a rocky road at night. That lantern doesn't erase the night. It doesn't magically smooth the road, but it gives just enough light to take the next step. That's what healing is, and that's what tomorrow can be for you. Not perfection, not a guarantee of endless joy, but the possibility of moving forward one step, one day, one breath at a time. Now, many people ask, how do I find hope when everything feels so heavy? The answer isn't simple, and it won't look the same for everyone. For some, it starts with creating small rituals, lighting a candle each morning, writing down one thing they're grateful for before bed, or simply sitting by a window to let the sunlight in. These little acts may not look like much on the surface, but they train the heart to notice that life, even in its brokenness, still has moments of tenderness worth holding on to. Others find hope in service, volunteering, helping a neighbor, or simply listening to a friend in need. When we pour kindness into the world, it often has a way of circling back, reminding us that we are not powerless. Even the smallest gesture can be a seed of light in someone else's darkness. But here is something important. Illuminating tomorrow's path does not mean rushing yourself into being okay. You don't have to wear a mask of happiness. You don't have to pretend you're healed when you're still hurting. Hope is not about faking joy. It's about making space for it to grow naturally in its own time. Sometimes that growth is slow, and that's okay. Flowers don't bloom the moment the seed is planted. The same is true for you. Let's imagine your healing as a garden. Right now, there may still be weeds of sorrow and thorny patches of regret, but in between, there are seeds you've been planting, moments of connection, words of kindness, glimpses of laughter. Some seeds take longer to sprout than others, but trust that the roots are forming even if you can't see them yet. One day, perhaps when you least expect it, you'll notice a small bloom pushing through the soil. That's tomorrow's path. Unexpected, delicate, but profoundly beautiful. I also want to remind you, tomorrow's path is not meant to be walked alone. Healing often unfolds in community. Maybe that means opening up to a trusted friend, joining a support group, or simply allowing yourself to lean on someone when the burden feels too heavy. There's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In grief, this couldn't be truer. Togetherness is often the lantern that helps us see farther down the road. Of course, there will still be shadows. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel waves of sadness again. There will be days when memories catch you off guard, when a song, a scent, or a familiar street brings tears rushing back. That doesn't mean you failed at healing. It simply means you're human. Shadows are not a sign of weakness. They're proof that love once lived deeply in you. And learning to walk with both the shadows and the light is what makes your tomorrow authentic. Now, let me offer a gentle perspective shift. What if tomorrow is not something you wait for, but something you create? Every choice you make today, no matter how small, is shaping the path ahead. Choosing to rest, to eat, to reach out, to breathe, to believe in something beyond this moment. These are bricks laid on the road toward a brighter tomorrow. And the beauty is, you don't have to build it all at once. One brick at a time is enough. I want to share a story. There was once a woman who lost everything in a fire. Her home, her belongings, even the journals she'd kept since childhood. For weeks, she sat in silence, unable to imagine any future beyond the ashes. But then she began picking up fragments from the ruins. A half-burned picture frame, a cracked teacup, a scorched book with only a few pages left intact. She didn't throw them away. Instead, she gathered them, and with time, she turned those fragments into a mosaic. Piece by piece, she built something new out of what remained. And in doing so, she illuminated her tomorrow. That's the essence of healing. It's not about restoring what once was, but about discovering what can still be created from the pieces you carry. So as you listen now, I invite you to ask yourself, what small act can I do today to honor the possibility of tomorrow? It doesn't have to be grand. Maybe it's calling someone you love. Maybe it's stepping outside and letting the breeze touch your skin. Maybe it's writing down a dream you thought you'd lost and allowing yourself to believe, even for a moment, that it could still be possible. Remember, illumination doesn't come from denying the dark. It comes from choosing to shine anyway. And you have that power, even if it feels small right now. As we close this chapter, let me leave you with this thought. Your story is still being written. The losses you've endured are part of the pages, yes, but they are not the ending. Every sunrise brings a new line, every choice a new paragraph. And while the scars you carry may never fully disappear, they can become part of a story that inspires others to keep walking too. Tomorrow's path is waiting, and though it may be winding, uncertain, and filled with both shadows and light, it is yours. Step into it with gentleness. Step into it with courage. Step into it knowing that behind every smile, every tear,
and every breath. You are not alone. This is Behind the Smile, and together we are finding the light.